Hackers do not think like bureaucrats. They don't follow red tape and their brains don't tend to work in straight lines. So, why does the public sector insist on hiring tech teams who all think exactly the same way? If every person in your defence room has the same cognitive profile, then your threat model has certainly got a massive exploitable blind spot. Welcome to another one of our special DTX partnership editions of the Secure Cyber Connect podcast. Our guest on this episode is Kayla Vondi, and we're going to be taking on the public sector with someone who operates at the high-stakes intersection of both technology and policy. Kayla is an AI project manager at the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, where she works across AI, cybersecurity, and public sector delivery. And her background includes working as a senior lead scientist for Booz Allen Hamilton. She brings deep expertise from both the tech and cyber fields alongside her lived-in experience as a neurodiverse woman, and is also a regular speaker on responsible AI and digital inclusion. Today, Kayla's here to talk about the reality of building resilient systems that actually work for real people and how to command respect in rooms where you're often told that you don't necessarily look the part. Kayla, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Looking forward to it.
So look, let's start with public sector resilience and the wide range of challenges that this term can cover. When it comes to specifically the more cyber defense focus, we often talk about diverse tech stacks and using a variety of tools and languages and frameworks, but rarely we talk about diverse minds. Why is cognitive diversity apparently such a hard and non-negotiable requirement for effective threat modeling?
Well, threat modeling isn't about technology. It's also about human behavior. I think that's the piece that people forget to take into account. When you're looking at hackers, they're not going to follow the same script every time that they're going to attack something. They're creative. They're looking for a way to exploit the system. And if you don't have that same creative thinking on the defense side, you're really opening yourself up to more risk.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. And, look, if the public sector is 100% neurotypical, and they think entirely by the bureaucratic playbook, what are the specific blind spots or perhaps vulnerabilities that are guaranteed to miss in times of crisis?
Well, definitely, because neurodiverse thinkers are the ones that are going to spot risks in the patterns and the gaps and the edge cases that don't align in those formal process maps. You can't have people who all think exactly the same. You're creating more risk at that point. And in the public sector, if your threat model fails, it's not about losing revenue for us. It's about disrupting services that people rely on. So predictability isn't safety, it's vulnerability. If everyone in the room thinks the same way, you're already compromised. So predictable teams build predictable defenses and therefore are predictable to attack.
And let's talk a little bit about the triple glass ceiling, if you will. The issues with obviously, the opportunities for women, immigration, and tech as such. You've brought an entirely different cultural lens to your work. There's an ongoingly, big conversation right now about the immigration tax in tech. We've talked a lot on the pod about the challenges that companies often put in place to balk against the costs and fees and financial burdens tied to hiring or working a foreign national, in the tech sector or cyber sector. This silent pressure of sort of proving your worth in a new country, navigating those complex visa dynamics, deciphering unwritten cultural rules. What's the reality of working in UK tech as an immigrant that many domestic leaders are still completely blind to?
Well, I think first of all, it's interesting to think of myself as an immigrant because I came from the US and people think, the US, the UK, it's very, very similar. It's all English. So I don't have the language barrier, but there's still a cultural barrier and there is a financial barrier when it comes to the visa process. It's extremely expensive. It's time consuming and there's always this legal fear of getting it wrong. So it's a really difficult process, and it not only just the visa piece of it, but the cultural piece of it, because even coming from, I don't have the language barrier, but understanding the way that people work here has been a complete learning curve for me.
I mean, we did a big episode of this one of our earlier episodes. We did a big episode on sponsorship and immigration. Do you think people are still living in with a thought process that's kind of outgrown now? I mean, I've been in search for a long time, and I feel that some of the attitudes that I know Warren and myself still get thrown at us with clients who their default setting is no, and I mean, do we think we've kind of grown out of that now, or do we think it's still a massive challenge?
I still think it's a challenge. I don't know if it's a massive challenge, but I still think it's a challenge, because there's so many rules from central government about what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. And I know in the public sector, we try our best to work within those rules because it's a legal requirement. But there's also, we risk falling into that trap of having the same thinkers. If we don't bring in diversity and lived experience that is different than ours, we're still having those predictable teams. We're having that predictable sameness, the same thinking. And it comes right back to the threat modeling of, are we increasing our risk because we're not opening ourselves up to bringing people in from outside? I think there's a lot of value that the lived experience of immigrants brings to particularly the tech world. And I think we have to make that balance of playing within the rules of the legal bounds that we have, but we can't shut it down completely. And I think we're moving in the right direction there. I don't think it's a massive challenge, but I still think that it is a challenge.
From your experience in the UK, do you think the public sector does better or worse than the private sector for this?
From my personal experience, yes, because most of the people that I got calls back for when I was interviewing was public sector. So I do want to give them their, kudos for that. But it's hard to know, because there's so many checks and balances, and there's so many hierarchical checks and things within the private sector. I don't really know how they're doing it. I know from some of my conversations with, companies here in Liverpool, they are trying to make a difference. They're trying to consider immigrants. We have, wonderful universities who bring in wonderfully diverse people from all over the world. And they see the value in keeping that talent here in the region. So I know that there's people who are talking about doing the right thing. I don't know the systems in and out, so I can only hope for the best. But I know at the Combined Authority, we definitely build in a lot of checks. We make sure that we are as blind as possible reviewing the resumes and everything, because there's a value in looking at the work that someone's presenting and not who they are.
No, absolutely.
And look, on top of that, we understand that cyber and AI is notoriously male-dominated. Organizations love to put women in tech or women in cyber within their brochures, but we also understand that behind closed doors, they often expect women to conform, to these male standards of leadership. So I'm curious, from your own personal experience, or perhaps one of your peers within your network, what's been one of the most exhausting bro cultures or bureaucratical norms that you've actively dismantled just to do your job?
Ooh, just one. Yes, I mean, male dominated is an understatement. I think there are some shifts, particularly within the Combined Authority. We are shifting to a more diverse technical cohort, but it's all still transitional. It's still moving. And as for dismantling, I think my biggest bro culture moment is about a previous life that I had, where I was working, and I actually had to change the way that I wrote emails to catch someone out as they were discriminating me because I was young and female. And I copied exactly what I had written. I gave it to a male colleague and had them send the exact same email to this person. And the responses were wildly different. I took those responses and I said, look, this is unacceptable. These are the exact same emails to the exact same person. Nothing has changed except for who sent the email. And that was something that created a very uncomfortable discussion for people. But it needed to be done because there was clearly a bias that was happening. And, I had to fight the fight to rectify that. I wasn't moving anywhere with the work. I wanted to get my job done. And I was hitting this wall because this one person just didn't respect me because of who I was and who I am.
I'm sorry to hear that you went through that, and we do appreciate you sharing. And just sort of following on from that, obviously, you've seen some changes, and you've been an advocate for those changes. How does that personally make you feel, knowing that there are individuals that perhaps still going through those barriers and those sort of situations?
We'll never dismantle every barrier, unfortunately, not without completely burning down the system and restructuring it. But, I will always fight that fight. I will always advocate and stand up for others and for myself when I have to. It's exhausting, and it's part of the mental load of being who I am in the fields that I choose to work in. But if I stop making a difference, if I stop bringing it up, if I stop trying, then it's only going to get worse because people will see that they can get away with the little things and it'll escalate to getting away with bigger things. And I can't do that to, the other women, the other neurodiverse, the other immigrants that are working alongside me. I can't do that. So I will always continue to do the fight. And I will dismantle as many barriers as I can in the way. But, I'm only one person.
No, that's brilliant. And I spoke with Asisa earlier this week, and she said something that stuck with me, and it was that a firefighter doesn't complain about the smoke. Doctors and nurses don't complain about the blood. You're in there to make a difference. So we do commend you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sitting at this intersection, when having, I guess insight from both a female perspective, navigating the UK as an immigrant, and of course with your neurodivergency, we hear the term, and certainly in recruitment, we hear the term cultural fit all the time. For good and for bad, we hear it. It's often something that's levied back to us when, candidates have clearly been, excellent in many areas, but the phrase cultural fit during hiring crops up, and it can be incredibly, annoying. I think it's probably the politest way of putting it. Is it just a weaponized HR term, that many companies use to keep this, this status quo, keeping maybe different and diverse individuals and their thoughts out of the room, because it might make other people feel uncomfortable. It might make the business have to look at itself a bit more deeply.
I think cultural fit is a loaded term, 100%. I think it comes with assumed standards that I hate the words cultural fit. I never use them.
Me too.
Because it's not, work shouldn't have a culture that we want to perpetuate. We should be bringing everyone's full selves to work because that's where we get the biggest picture. And I think when we look at places that use cultural fit, with people who are further along in their career, especially neurodiverse people or people who have dealt with work culture before, we can mask a certain amount to get through an interview, to get in the door, which then helps us along. But I think it really does a disservice to those that are just starting out in their career, who have not had the experience of understanding how to play the game to get in the door. And I think it's also really anti-immigrant. That's also a loaded term, but it really is, because it's saying, do you fit in with us? And they're already so othered. I say they, I'm technically an immigrant, but we're looking at it from a, do you deserve to be in here? And that's kind of how it reads. And it's very othering in a way that I don't think a lot of people understand that, because it makes that assumption of, are you white? Are you male? Do you get along with us? Do we want to have a beer with you? Those are typically what they're looking for, but not saying. So I think cultural fit is such a loaded term to use. I don't know if it's weaponized, but I think it could be also. I think it's weaponized when I'm thinking about it. And I think it really limits people, particularly those that don't know how to play the game, that haven't tried and failed and figured out those masking techniques to play the game. It's all a game.
Definitely up there for a red flag on a job description, especially if the salary isn't disclosed, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. I never give credence to people who don't put salary, at least a range, on there, because you're looking for me to negotiate. You're trying to see how much you think I'm worth, and I don't play that game.
No, we pride ourselves on transparency. You'll hear it secure. And look, for women listening right now, especially those from immigrant background or those that are perhaps neurodivergent, perhaps they're walking into a room full of intimidating male-dominated tech, tomorrow morning. What's your exact playbook, for taking up the space and commanding respect and not shrinking into yourself?
I don't think there is an exact playbook, and I don't think we should assume that there is a right way of doing it. But there's a couple of tips that I have, which is, no one in there knows what you're capable of, and they already make assumptions about you. But that doesn't matter, because they're never going to change who you are. Their opinions ultimately do not matter. And as much as you want to get in the door, do you really want to work for someone who's going to be treating you in that way? So whenever I walk into a room, I just act like I need to be there. And if someone's like, oh, what are you doing here? Yeah, I was invited. I'm in the room. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to throw me out in front of everybody? I deserve to be here. And that's not a comfortable place for both me and other people to be in. But it's something that throughout my career I've realized they don't want to be challenged. So if they're going to try and do a power play on me, I'll just be like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. You want to repeat that? Because then that makes them think, oh, wait, what did I just say? So sometimes I like to hold the mirror up a little bit and be like, oh, you really want to challenge me being in the room? What about me being in the room is difficult for you? Maybe this is something we should talk about, that maybe this is a growth opportunity for you. How do we reflect and turn that back on them? Because we have every right to be in that room.
100%. I absolutely love that. Jay, what's your perspective on that? Is there any ways that you feel that women can prepare when they are going into these rooms, perhaps?
I think it's like Kurt says, you just it's act with confidence. I mean, it's easier said than done, and of course, especially when we're talking about sometimes people who may have the neurodivergence and maybe their own I guess personality traits. So it's easy for me to sit here and say just do this, but yeah, I think it's the value you bring is born out of how you project yourself. And there are people out there, and not just in work, in life in general, there are intimidating people. There are people that are uncomfortable. There are people that will always try and I guess flex. But I think in the workplace especially, you do tend to get that more. So yeah, I think just walk with purpose and have pride in yourself is that. And as we talked about, I think this the quality always shines through. So that would be the best advice I can give.
Most definitely. And look, Kayla, the tech industry talks a lot about burnout. doing your job in the public sector, I understand that it brings an entirely different level of pressure. You mentioned masking earlier. So what's the reality of masking your neurodivergency within the tech environment?
Oh, burnout is something I know very, very well. One of the reasons I'm in the public sector is because I am very passionate about doing tech for good and for the benefit of people, particularly with the surgence of AI right now. Everybody is trying to do everything with AI, and I don't know whether or not it's necessary or for people. And so for me, it's a very passionate place to be. But putting that passion on top of the workload, the demands, and the masking that I have to do in certain rooms, burnout is a close personal friend of mine. It's something that I have to live with and have to learn how to navigate. Luckily, I have a supportive family unit where I can completely decompress on weekends, or I have that support when I need to recover. But masking at work it's hard, and it's something that I've learned to make a little more transparent. So I mask when I have to, which is usually if I'm, interacting with people I've never met before. So I'll turn it on and I'll say, oh, it's fantastic. I'm doing great. I'm having fun. It's kind of like when I'm on a stage, I'm putting on a front because I don't know what to expect. But I have really open conversations with my manager, and my manager is fantastic, where I've been able to tell her, I'm close to burnout. I've been burning the candle at both ends. I need a day off. I need to not be given additional jobs today. I need to just focus on what I need to do, and I need this break. And luckily, I'm in a very privileged position where my boss understands that and understands the value of letting me have a day or two here or there to just focus on what I need to focus on and then come back full steam the next week. But it's layers of build up to burnout. And it's like I said, it's a close personal friend of mine, and everybody has to recover in their own way. And I think that's something other people don't really understand, is when we do hit burnout, not everybody recovers the same way. Some people need to go away from technology, go sit by the ocean and watch the waves. Some people need to hide under a blanket with snacks. We have to figure out what works for us, and we need to make sure that organizations build those support systems in where we're allowed to say, this is too much. I need a day. I need 2 days. I need to take the weekend, and I need no one to talk to me. And that's something that I'm working with our organization. I have a supportive manager, but from the wider perspective of the organization, I'm trying to put together a network where we can train leaders to understand that and understand how to be supportive in that way.
No, that sounds fascinating. I appreciate you sharing. And before we move on, very briefly, if individuals are in that time of crisis, they're in the mix of it, they're in that boardroom, or you're at their desk, are there any tips, any strategies that you find effective just to sort of rebalance yourself in the moment, or anything that perhaps could be helpful to audience?
Definitely. So I do a mix of things. Sometimes I have a fidget of some sort. That helps a lot when I'm on Teams calls because it's something I can do out of sight of everybody else. And when I'm in rooms with people, I like to do a grounding thing. So I focus on moving my toes against the ground. I touch the desk in front of me, and I just try and make sure I'm thinking about where I am physically in the space, and try and let the noise happen around me and just think, okay, it's fine. I'm here. We're going to be okay. This is not my emergency. And I always try and tell myself that, because my natural instinct is, yes, I'll fix this right away for you. I want to be helpful. I'm going to do it. But I know that is where I hit burnout, when I start to make other people's emergencies my priorities and my emergencies. So it's about reminding myself, yes, they have a priority to do this. They think it's an emergency. I need to look at what I have. What is my emergency? What is my priority today? and always centering me. And I know that sounds really like a selfish way of looking at it, but we have to remember that when we work for corporations, they're going to look out for themselves. Like, corporations look after for themselves. They don't ultimately care about you as a human being. Managers might, and from a people to people standpoint, yes, but the corporation itself, you are a number ultimately. And this is something that's been ingrained in me for years because I worked in the US. It's better here in the UK, but you have to remember in times of crisis and in times of stress that you have to look out for you, and you need to figure out what you need in that moment to feel okay, to feel stable, and to be able to move forward. And that should be your priority focus.
Just building on what we've talked about, I guess we've talked about obviously the support in terms of burnout but what else can government, governmental departments do to really support, get it right, support their staff, and rather than just slap a neurodiversity sticker on the careers page and a couple of other testimonials, what else is there that they can do that we haven't maybe talked about, in previous answers?
I think a big one is what I like to call organizational justice, which is the policies, the guidance, the training for managers about getting it right, and the consequences laid out clearly if someone gets it wrong. So if there is a mistreatment of someone because of the way that they think, the way that they need to work, if someone is, needs to have shifted hours because that's how their brain works best. Like, I prefer to work in the morning, but I have colleagues that prefer to work in the evening. And if we were on the same team and the manager above us said, well, this isn't working because we don't have a good enough team overlap, how do we ensure that there's organizational justice that says, no, this is fine. We can do everything by written. We will make a plan so that this can work and these people can be supported in the ways that they work, in the ways that they need to be supported. And I think that that's really a key piece of it, is making sure that there is the justice to be done to make sure that everyone's supported rights are upheld.
Absolutely.
Let's pivot our focus to artificial intelligence. In the corporate world, AI is designed for efficiency and, of course, profit. We also appreciate from the public sector, AI is public facing. It impacts real lives, services. And from your lived experience, you've been a neurodivergent individual. How has that influenced the way that you approach both trustworthy, accessible AI in the public sector?
You're right. I mean, AI is everywhere. And for us, it is about the experience that people are having with AI. Efficiency is great. It's fine. Should never be the main focus, in my opinion. So, whatever we use internally to be efficient is one thing, but anything that we have that it's external facing cannot be efficient. It has to be trustworthy and accessible. And I've met a couple of really key, I'm going to call them influencers, but they're people who are they're advocates. I've met a couple of key advocates in the region who have really helped me understand accessibility beyond just my own lived experience. And I think that's really a key here, is that no one person's lived experience can define how we move forward. And it's important for me, knowing that my experience is different than most, to bring additional voices into the room when I can, to say, this is what we want to do. Here's the plan. Please break it. Find my loopholes. Find the things that I haven't considered because it's not part of my lived experience.
And look, within the public sector, there's and with the swathe and tidal wave of vendors out there, now pitching, AI tech. When you look at this, the AI and what is actually being pitched to the public sector and the government bodies, what's the biggest accessibility, or maybe the most human-centric flaw that you're seeing with these vendors? What are they ignoring? What is the main thing that they're just not picking up on?
I think one of the things I've noticed from vendors, and I can't fault them, they're trying to make sales, it's business, I get it, but they come at it trying to sell to the public sector, to the people working in the public sector, of this tool will save you time, it will do the things for you. Well, all of our work impacts the public. And they miss that piece. They also miss the fact that a lot of people in the public sector devote their lives to the public sector. We joke and we call them lifers. People who've been there for 20, 30 years in these roles because they believe in the work that they're doing. So when you're coming in looking at it from an efficiency standpoint, you're automatically a threat to them. You're not looking at the fact that these people have devoted their lives to this work. They don't want to be replaced by technology. If they come in and they say, oh, this is going to augment your work so that you can provide better services to the public, that's just a little tweak in the framing of what they're saying. And it would be more palatable on our end to be able to receive something that's like acknowledgement of the layers of what it is that we do.
Yeah, because that's the fear across every sector, private sector. But I get it that it's accentuated, I would imagine, more within public sector services in terms of the vendor pitch, for sure.
Definitely. And some of the people who have been there for multiple decades have been doing it manually forever. I mean, it's what they know. It's what they're comfortable with. They've been through many things that have been trialed and not taken up. And, they've existed and they've outlasted it all. And those are the people that are going to be the hardest sell. And if you understand that that's what they're looking at and that's the way that they're thinking, it's much easier to convince or at least get them to look at something.
Absolutely. So, staying on that, in terms of the I guess the responsibility of the public sector. You've said that public government bodies have a very real opportunity, a genuine opportunity and responsibility to lead on inclusive tech and within cyber. Why is the government uniquely positioned to set the standard here? And where, in your opinion, are the glaring gaps that still exist today?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just being uniquely positioned. I think there is a responsibility for us to set a standard because pulling it back to the beginning, it's not about revenue. It's about services that people rely on. And so when that underpins everything that we do, we need to be able to set the standard for accessibility. We're the ones who know the multiple deprivation areas. We're the ones that know how digitally inclusive our regions are. We have all of this data about the people. We need to be using that to make the services that we're creating and the tech that we're using accessible to those people. I think it's a responsibility for us to do that as the public sector. We should be the ones looking ahead saying, hey, AI is coming. It's going to change the way jobs work. How can we create a program to support those that might be without work? How do we get them upskilled, reskilled, and back into the workforce if that's something that they want to choose? And I think it's a responsibility for government to do that because we are the ones ultimately creating these situations for the public. We need to take the public into consideration and look forward. We have to take care of them.
And it's one final takeaway for policymakers, C-suite leaders and hire managers perhaps listening today. If they want to build out true, resilient, cognitive, diverse tech workforce, what's one actionable change that they can make Monday morning?
Listen and ask questions and try to turn down that voice that wants to be defensive of, but it's always worked this way for us. And we talk a bit about reciprocal mentoring. So it's those executive level people who are going and learning about the lived experiences of some of their workers. And in exchange, they teach them something else as well, whatever it is that they're an expert at. But it's about going and not having that fear to ask questions and just listen. Just listen. Because that's where you're going to learn about how your workforce works and about what gaps you might have. What are considerations you've never thought of? And it all starts with listening. We've got to put the ego aside, and we just have to say, you know what? I'd love to learn more about what it's like for you here in the company, in the organization. What works, what doesn't work? Why is it that you need the support that you need? Do you not have support that you need? Understanding people and looking at it from a really human perspective, that's the first place I would start.
So let's come to DTX. Obviously, we know that building trust is very much a core pillar of DTX's mantra. And let's look at that within the public sector. When a system fails, as you've readily admitted and talked about on the episode, it's not a loss of revenue specifically, although it can often be a byproduct. It's a breach of the social contract. So how do you build that human-first resilience into systems where the end user isn't a tech-savvy, customer, but more often than not a highly vulnerable individual who just wants nothing more and actually needs their services just to work efficiently?
I don't think there's one way of doing this, but I can tell you what we've done in Liverpool. So we worked with the Civic Data Cooperative, which is a group that we formed cooperatively with the University of Liverpool. We brought together a residents' assembly and created what we call the LCR Community Charter for Data and AI. So we brought residents from across the entire region, real people who interact with our services every single day, and said, what matters to you about your data? And we just listened. And I thought that was so enlightening for us, because now what we have is we have these principles that they ranked. Citizens did it themselves. The residents did it themselves. The things that matter the most to them. And when we use that to underpin everything that we do and the way that we design everything, it really helps us build the trust with the public, because we say, you informed this. We listened to you. And I think that's, for me, really, really valuable. We work for the public. We work at the pleasure of the public, and everything we do should be benefiting them. So why would we do something if we didn't ask them what the impact is for them?
Absolutely. And look, the exhibition floor at DTX is typically full of a large number of vendors, all pitching the latest tech, cutting edge tools. When you're about and you're walking that floor, putting yourself into the shoes of the government buyers, what's the one question that you wish they would ask these vendors to ensure that they're not making mistakes in procuring yet more exclusionary or targeted tech that can often leave certain communities left behind?
There's so many. It's hard to pick just one, but I think it's...
Go for a few then. Go for it. Go for
a few. Okay. I want them to interrogate the tech. Where does the data sit? That's huge, because where the data lives in their systems impacts the legal cover that is on top of that data. And then the second one is, are you trying to make me more efficient? Are you trying to benefit the people that I work with, like the public? And then the other one is, are you just a wrapper on top of ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is? Or do you actually build this yourself? Is this self-contained? How easily can this be broken if somebody hacks ChatGPT or ChatGPT goes rogue? How is that going to impact your systems and your company that I may be bringing as a risk into mine? So those, I guess, are three ones that I would think of.
Yeah, good shout.
Well, that's brilliant. And we're going to be at DTX. The theme this year is about moving from purpose to practice. And of course, within the public sector, practice means delivering new service to millions of citizens that they rely on every single day. So let's get a bit specific about that. Why are events such as DTX so important for public sector leaders and organizations?
DTX is amazing. I went last year. It was my first conference in the UK in my role. And I think it's so important that we bring tech and thought leaders together with public sector. It's that triple helix: industry, academia, and public sector, because we all have to learn from each other. We're all looking in different windows of the same house. And if we don't learn how to work together and complement each other, there's not really a bright future for that. We become more siloed, we become more competitive, and that's just not, it's not going to work for us in this very connected world. And as much as I love to tout the triple helix, and it's something a lot of other people say, there's really a fourth strand, which is the community. And it's about going into it with that community mindset. And that's that purpose. It's purpose driven. And so many in the public sector are purpose driven. And that's where I think academia and industry could learn a little bit from the public sector. And it's something that's going to drive every conversation for us. Why are we doing this? You know, we're using public funds. We are making services for the public. As great as your innovation is, what's the impact?
I appreciate you sharing there. And we also understand the public sector. There's a massive tension between the fail fast culture and the culture of tech that should never fail. You know, how can neurodivergent leaders help public sector bodies navigate the paradox and identify smarter risks that perhaps can help accelerate and move the needle when it comes to digital transformation?
I think neurodivergent people are really, really important, particularly in leadership roles, because of the creative thinking. And failing fast, yeah, that works well when you've got, you know, profit that you're making. But in the public sector, we don't have profit to fall back on. We can't fail fast. We can't fail at all, really, because we are serving. For me, I have 1.6 million residents that I am serving every single day. That's a lot of people to yell at me if I get it wrong. So we have to be creative from the start, looking at those risks and finding out what's acceptable. Is it okay that we have an 80% solution right now that we could look at as a transitional piece while we figure out what that final step looks like? Is that okay? But also, how do we explain that to people, the 20% that may not be served by the solution? And it's about finding that balance. And I think neurodivergent people are really good at finding that creativity and those gaps and those patterns of, we've done this before and it has taken forever and it never really works out right. How can we look at it differently?
So look, let's finish with a biggie. So we know accessibility is finally moving, albeit slowly, from a policy checkbox to an actual delivery requirement. If you could rewrite the whole public sector's digital playbook going forward, what would be the one unwritten rule of government tech that you would delete, make, you know, just wipe out to make the industry actually work for people who, as we said at the foot, apparently don't look the part?
That is a huge question. That is a whopper to end on. One thing that I could delete.
Told you it was a biggie.
Whew. There's so many. There's so many things I would love to change. I don't know if I would delete anything completely.
Give you two. I'll give you two. We'll be kind at the end. We'll let you split. We'll let you split the answer.
You're so kind. Throw the whopper at me and then give me a hug. It's fine. The thing that I think needs to change the most is the time it takes to do the good research for making a change. So, for an example, if we were to put a chatbot onto the website, right? Love that. We would have to have panels, talk to people, do all these things internally. There needs to be generic overarching research done where it says, we've talked to these accessibility groups. This is what our troubles with them with technology, so that we don't have to convene people for every decision that we're making. I think it's important to listen to people, but the more that we do that, the slower our progress is. So I would put it's a delicate balance, because like I said, it's so important that we listen to people and we get actual public to inform some of our changes, since they're the ones that are going to be using it. But we need to work from a playbook of general good to knows, like, hey, you need to make sure that there's color contrast that's appropriate for people who have sight differences. You need to make sure that there's an option for an auditory playback. There are so many different things. And if we had a list of that, maybe there was one that exists, I've never seen it, but it would be really great to know and to have that informed directly by the public that we serve. So if I could get 1.6 million people to tell me what they do and do not like about technology, that would be great. I could use that every single time I'm looking to make a decision, looking to put something else out into the world. And then that allows me to assess my risk. How good of a solution is this? How do I connect with the people that this doesn't serve?
Good choice. Warren, we're coming to the end of the episode now. Anything else you want to ask Kayla before we wrap the episode up?
Yeah, Kayla, I'm just curious here, what's the future hold for yourself, the organisation, and moving forward, what are you excited about?
See, that's a great question to end on. Much more exciting for me. But it's all exciting times in Liverpool. We are massively growing. We have a whole AI team. We're the first public sector body at the regional level to have a chief AI officer. We're really growing as a team. I'm hiring more people. We're really excited. We're really engaged with, everybody around the region. It's an exciting time to work for Liverpool. And for me in particular, I'm very excited to jump into, embedding more cyber work within the region as well. I'm really passionate about creating, not just career pathways for our students within the region to work in digital and tech and all of that, but I want to work with adults and others who are maybe wanting to change careers and reskill as well. And we should create those pathways for them too. So I'm really excited about everything that we've got coming forward.
That's incredible. And I'm really looking forward to obviously listening to you speak at DTX later next week. To our audience, of course, check the show notes to get your free ticket. Join myself, Jay, Kayla, and many others at DTX Manchester on the 29th of April and the 30th of April.
Well, Kayla, listen, thank you. It's been brilliant, and I'm sure the audience will have loved your insights on both AI and DE&I. Anywhere else that they can reach out to you, going forward? Obviously, LinkedIn. Anywhere else that you may want to sort of shout out where people can connect with you?
No, LinkedIn is the greatest way to connect with me, and please come up and find me at DTX. I have purple hair. It'll be more purple when I'm there, but I'm very easy to find. So please come up and have a conversation. I'm very happy to do so.
So it's time to bypass the bureaucracy. Today we're opening early access to a private enterprise-grade platform inside the secure CyberConnect ecosystem. For professionals, stop fighting rigid recruitment algorithms, prove your actual capability with our CV market analyzer, hone your skills with our AI mock interview simulator, and position yourself directly in front of decision makers who value how you think, not just how you look on paper. For leaders and public sector teams, stop bleeding your budgets on recruitment agencies that just pass you identical CVs. Scale smartly with our skill-verified hiring engine to find the exact cognitive and cultural diversity that your threat models are missing. And for organizations, eradicate that costly tool sprawl and freeze knowledge leakage. Consolidate your hiring, CRM, and lead intelligence into one single engine. Capture the technical wisdom of your top performers before they leave, and instantly connect with proven tools in our vetted partner marketplace.
So stop fighting a broken system, hit the link in the description and use the private access code look the part, and bypass the waiting list today. And one more challenge we've got for you, our audience. Kayla's talked about taking up space in the room that weren't built for us. So if you've gone down that, drop it in the comments. You want to understand what's been the biggest outdated hiring rule or corporate standard in tech that needs to be permanently retired or deleted, or sent to room 404.